yourself first.
Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Doretha Allen. I am a National Board Certified Teacher. I initially certified in literacy, reading, language arts in 2009, and I renewed in 2019. I've taught elementary and middle schools, and I have coached reading coaches K-12, and now I'm still in Dallas ISD working as an innovation coordinator in the Office of Transformation and Innovation.
Great. And Margaret?
Hi, everyone. My name is Margaret Arlowskis, and I work in the Boston Public School District. I initially certified in 2017. My content area was English as a new language, early middle childhood, and I currently work as a teacher for Boston Public Schools, teaching English as a second language and special education. I also help with the Boston Network in terms of candidate support to get more teachers in our district to become nationally board certified.
Great. Thank you both. And so as you can see, you're in wonderful hands for component 2. So with that, I'm going to leave it with Margaret and Doretha.
So we're going to begin with our agenda today. We'll first start off with an overview of what component 2 is like. We'll talk about differentiation and tips for doing that. And then we'll end today with a body of knowledge and how that kind of looks in terms of component 2. This is a pie chart, and this can be found in the scoring guide. It's pretty helpful to see the visual in terms of what all of the components percentages are, but particularly today for component 2, this component is worth 15%. So it's worth a good amount, but not as much as component 3, which is 30%. So it's a good visual to know what this is worth. This slide is very helpful, and when you when this call ends today, a day later, you'll get a copy of the webinar, and you'll be able to click on these various resources. There's an overview video, a graphic organizer, and then you can see the architecture of accomplished teaching and the 5 core propositions. Also, you can see the webinar recording that Dr. Allen and I facilitated back in August, and so you can get some more tips around component 2. Component 2, this is, really highlighting your ability to differentiate for your students within your instruction and in your planning. It really highlights your ability to evaluate student learning, particularly their strengths, as well as their needs for improvement for each individual student. This requires you to plan and implement appropriate instruction for your students, and also to analyze and modify strategies and materials based on your ongoing assessment of student growth. This component is a classroom-based portfolio entry, meaning that you'll need to collect samples of student work. If you are music, you would collect the video that demonstrates the student's growth over time. In addition, there's a written commentary that will ask you to analyze your instructional choices, why you did certain things and at what time in order to benefit student learning. This component, it's really important to think about the students that are going to be featured for this entry. And this slide helps you to think about and organize which students you'll choose. Some ideas could be to think about students of different needs, abilities, perhaps linguistic and cultural backgrounds, in order to best show how you can adapt your instruction differently for each individual student. If you choose an advanced student, you want to make sure that you show how you continually challenge that student to even make more progress. You are not necessarily scored on how well your students do, but rather it's about you as a teacher and how well you adapt your instruction in order to best meet your students' need at that particular time. National Board recommends selecting at least 5 students. So as you're going through the process, it's important to collect evidence from various students, particularly because sometimes maybe the students that you thought you were going to collect evidence from are not the same students. So it's good to collect at least 5 students' evidence so that you can show the breadth of your teaching and show the progress over time that these students are able to make. Students do not have to be in the same class, but they should be doing the same assignments so that you can show how two different students are making progress at their own rate on the same assignment. So here is an activity that is very helpful in order to help you start to think about differentiation in terms of your instruction. It's a scavenger hunt. And again, when the presentation ends tomorrow, you'll get the slideshow and you'll be able to click on component 2, scavenger hunt. So I think we can show you now a little bit of what this looks like. Great. So this here really just helps you to think about like organizing, like pre-work before getting into the real work. And so it's important to read over your component 2 for your certificate area and to think about and to find what standard number as well as the standard title that you need to show evidence of in your commentary as well as in your student work samples. And then if you scroll down, you'll see questions like what is the total number of pages in order to submit for your commentary, how are the pages allocated, broken down for each section. And then these questions here help you to think about the student work, such as how many samples, how many focus students, from what time period is National Board looking for you to select this work? And then also in terms of the quality of the work, this kind of an activity helps you think about the rubric by making you look at what a level 4 rubric looks like. What should you consider in making your selection of the focus students? What should you consider in terms of the instructional sequence, identifying important features of the sequence? And then in terms of the differentiation piece, it really asks you to think about how will you show differentiation, and particularly how will you show it to show that you've impacted student learning in a positive way. And there's a few more other questions at the bottom, but this here definitely helps you in terms of the pre-work to think about what you're doing and how in the future, as you're working on component 2, what areas you may need to find more evidence to when you have it in your sample of student work or in your written commentary to make sure you're addressing the questions and the standards. So differentiation for National Board is a few things. One, it's being able to evaluate learning, particularly the strengths and the needs for each of your individual students. It's about planning and implementing appropriate differentiated instruction for those students at that particular time that you're working with them. It's about analyzing and modifying instructional strategies and materials based on your ongoing assessment of student growth and learning. Also, differentiation looks like teachers treating students equitably, recognizing the differences that distinguish one student from another and taking into account these differences in their practice. Teachers may provide differentiation by varying the amount of time they allow students to complete assignments or by providing students with choices in literacy engagements. Also, in terms of reading levels, teachers may provide access with different readability levels in terms of the mentor text. Teachers know that when planning lessons, it is important to vary options related to the process and the products to meet the varied interests within the class.
Thank you, Margaret. Now I want to pivot a little bit and talk about the National Board Conversations podcast. If you are on this call, it's because you're interested in National Board, and I would encourage you to listen to the National Board Conversations podcast. Right now, there are 5 out, and each podcast is about 15 minutes. And there is a different perspective from each National Board teacher that is highlighted. In this episode, episode 2, Juliana Urtubey is the state teacher of the year for Nevada. And in her conversation, she talks about the body of knowledge. And the body of knowledge consists of 3 things. It's the 5 core props, which is the basis for National Board, the architecture of accomplished teaching, and the certification standards. She talks about having a deep understanding of these 3 documents because it helps you once you go to plan your lesson and once you go to write about your lesson as you're describing, analyzing, and reflecting on the lessons. So I wanted to drop this here just to encourage everyone on the call, if you have not listened to it, to listen to it, because she talks about giving yourself the gift of time to really have a deep understanding of these 3 documents. Okay, right. So when we talk about the body of knowledge, we're talking about the 5 core props, which is the basis of everything in National Board. And the first one is teachers are committed to students and their learning. And accomplished teaching for this looks like this in the green box. And I'm not going to read it for you because I really want to advance. Okay, you can advance for us, Lisa. So when you go through the general portfolio directions, if you haven't signed up yet, you will have the core props and the architecture of accomplished teaching in 2 different versions. The one in the middle, that double helix, is a visual representation of the architecture. There is also a table format which has the same information, but it gives you a little bit more because it gives you a description of the 5 core props, but there are also guiding questions to really get you to dig into that evidence. I always like to show both of these side by side because as a learner, you may interpret it different. One may ring truer to you, even though it's talking about the same thing. Okay, one more, Lisa. And then the standards. So you want to read all of these one at a time and then in tandem. The standards are built from the architecture. The architecture is built from the 5 core props. And so you'll just see multiple connections every time you read. So we wanted to give you an activity to kind of help you understand the 5 core props. If you went to school to be a teacher, or even if you came through an alternative certification, there is always a framework for basic lesson planning. And I always tell my age a little bit because when I came through school, I learned Madeline Hunter, the anticipatory set, the objective, all of those things. For National Board, for accomplished teaching, that framework is the architecture of accomplished teaching, which is on the left. So as you start at the bottom, where are your students? And then you set your goals and you move up. You are working through the framework, working through the thinking of accomplished teaching to establish your lesson. And those questions are on the right in the table to guide you through that process. So now let's talk about the scoring rubric. You will score on your component from a 0.75 through a 4.25. It's a 12-point scale. So let's keep going. So the level 4 is the highest, that's the best. Clear, consistent, and convincing. 3 is clear, 2 is limited, 1 is little or no evidence, okay? So everyone's goal and dream is to make a 4, 2.75 is deemed accomplished, all right? So 2 and 3 is where most people land between the score family of a 2 and 3. So on this slide, what we've done, we've put out the level 2 rubric next to the level 3 rubric. And when you look at them closely, you'll see the highlights on the level 3 is where it's a notch above. It's one better in each category. And it's very nuanced. So you want to spend time here really kind of looking at the highlights. So in the first one, it says the teacher recognizes student learning differences and past experiences. But on the level 3, it's the teacher recognizes students' individual learning difference. Remember, component 2 is all about differentiation. How are you drilling down to that individual student and tailoring your teaching practice to reach them where they are? Okay? So if you don't leave with anything else from here, Lisa, advance one for me. Know that level 2 is limited. That means you showed some, but you didn't explain it all the way. And you have to go further. And level 3 is clear evidence, right? And those highlights just gives you the different nuances to move from that limited to that clear. Now, I would not be doing my job if I did not show you the highest and really spend the most time there. Because as an NBCT working with other candidates, national board candidates, I want you to get a 4 because it tells us how to get a 4. Now, the language that you will see in a level 4 rubric is clear, consistent, and convincing. Purposeful, short and long-term data-driven goals. Deep understanding of strengths and weaknesses, monitoring student progress over time. Lisa, you can keep advancing because it's going to highlight those. Employs a variety of developmentally appropriate and specific writing strategies. It will always be tightly connected and seamless, combining reading and writing process. Now, I do want to put out a disclaimer that this is the level 4 rubric for literacy, reading language arts, early to middle childhood. But there is a page like this for every single component area. Keep going, Lisa. I think 1 or 2 more clicks. There is a page like this for every component area. And what you need to take away is that level 4 is clear, consistent, and convincing. That means you show evidence from your planning, through your instruction, through what would you do differently, all the way. Okay, it's clear, consistent, and convincing. Now, the language may change, but it is always going to be those 3 C's. So right now, we're about 26 minutes and your head may be hurting. Your head may be hurting. You know, I'm going to just say, let's just take a deep breath and kind of shake it off. I know it's a lot. I know it's a lot. And you might just be saying, you know what, Doretha, this is all fantastic, but can you just tell me where to get started? Because I need to know where to get started. And friend, I hear you. I hear you. So I want to encourage you to start here. Start with that, the 5 core props, the architecture of accomplished teaching, and the standards. Start there, stay there, read it. Every time you read it, use a different color pen to highlight and annotate because it will hit you differently every time you do it. All right, one more time, Lisa. Read, read, and read. And then after you do that, I want you to put it down, go take a walk outside, come back, and then do it again. One more time, Lisa. And again. And again. These are your reference documents. You will never go away from them. When you get stuck and things feel like they don't make sense, like, what are they talking about? Why is this? Are they saying the same thing over and over again? It may feel that way, but if you hear it 2 or 3 times, it's not the same. And the way you can get clarity is going back to those standards. In the standards, it really gives you lots of practice. When you read the standards, you will read terms like the accomplished teacher knows, the accomplished teacher does, the accomplished teacher acts, the accomplished teacher sees. And if those aren't things that you are doing, start doing them. Keep doing them until it becomes second nature, because that will shift your practice. So I know you're saying, Dr. Allen, that it's a lot. It's a lot. Okay, I'm gonna read these. Then you need to couple those 3 documents on the left, the architecture, the 5 core props, and your standards. You need to couple those docs with your directions. Because once you have a deep understanding of your standards, your framework, and the 5 core props, then you can see yourself in your, then you can get your component directions, your rubrics, and then we can start to process and think about those and how they fit together. All right. So the way I function is that I need all of those things on one sheet of paper. Unless you have a giant table and you're at the dining room table and you have your highlighters and your pens and your stickies, I like to put it all in one document where I can see my questions, my core prop, my standard, and my level 4 rubric. So what I have created for you all is one document where you can work on those. And so if you go to that bit.ly, and you don't have to go now because I'm gonna just talk you through it. It's in your resources and you will be able to look at it after. The yellow in the middle of the page is an example from world languages. So what I've done, I've gone to world languages and I just pulled the first commentary question. And it is, what do you know about each of these students prior to language experience? Learning preferences, background, interests, and goals. So that's the commentary question. Well, core prop, I know that is, you know your students. Core prop 1, you know your students. Now I'm gonna go over to those standards for world language in component 2, and they are covering knowledge of students and knowledge of language. And then now I'm looking at the level 4 rubric from those descriptors, and this is the language that is best aligned to that. The teacher uses knowledge of student learning styles, backgrounds, experiences, and goals to make informed decisions about instructional context. So now as a teacher, I know I need to know my students, I need to know language, because this question, I need to answer that question for my commentary. So this document is one that, again, it's gonna it's gonna force a copy. So you just click yes on force copy, and then it's yours to do what you want with it. Go through your commentary questions, the core props, your standards, your level 4 rubric, and fill it out. Yes, this takes time, but again, this is deepening your knowledge in the body of knowledge, deepening your understanding. Okay, Lisa, we're ready. Okay, so just to recap, we've given you a little bit more this time than back in the summer. So not only did we talk to you about what differentiation is for National Board, the body of knowledge, the 5 core props, the architecture of accomplished teaching, and the standards. We've given you some activities that you can go back and do. If you are doing this with a friend, y'all go through it together. Say, hey, do this week, and then on Saturday, let's get together and talk through it. These activities will help you become more familiar with your documents and deepen your knowledge around them.